Hi, I'm Author Assist, proud sponsor of the 3-act structure show on the GoIndieNow platform. Author Assist offers affordable services and one-on-one training to independent authors. I help them from brainstorming an idea to publishing and the promotion and marketing of the book. I have 2 podcasts, Narrations by KK and Behind the Pen. I'm the host of the radio show Author Assist on the Artist First Radio Network, and I'm also a multi-award-winning filmmaker, love creating book trailers. I'm also a graphic designer and offer at least another 20 services that will help authors navigate and stand out. If you're a new author and you're holding the copy of your book in your hands, thinking, now what? That's when you need Author Assist. Contact me for a service sheet at kgantusauthораssist@gmail.com.
When we deconstruct the elements of story and its structure, whether you acknowledge 3 acts or not, our focus shifts to one aspect that connects us all: the characters. Since the dawn of storytelling itself, there has always been one side's hero and one side's villain. Now, where you may fall in who you support or relate to might shift, but it's always there. However, these days, it's even more layered and complicated. When we have been able to nuance and finite roles and involvement, gray the black and white. It's that examination we will be doing this season. And we'll be doing it in 3-act structure. They are the ones that know you better than anyone. They test your mental state and anger and frustrate you. They challenge your authority and what you have. They know how to push your buttons and see right through you. They are the foil.
So I'm David Green. I have a Mancunian accent, which can cause issues occasionally when I say certain words. But I live in Galway, Ireland. I write dark epic fantasy and urban fantasy.
I am Jim Nettles. I do not have a Galway accent, but that's okay. Or any other fun accent. But I am a science fiction, fantasy, horror, this, that, and the other author, as well as a nonfiction author as well. I am founder of Author Essentials. We do a lot of workshops. We do services for authors. And I am one of the founders for the Continual Convention as well, and the business track director for the Speculative Fiction Academy.
Hi everyone, I'm Karina Gantus. I am author of prolific fiction. I write in all different genres and I make up my own as I go along. I'm also a podcaster, YouTuber, award-winning filmmaker, and I also run the Author Assist program, which helps authors with their marketing and promotion, everything from brainstorming an idea right through to marketing the final project.
Hey, I am Courtney Cannon, aka CEO Cannon. I write fantasy and sci-fi sometimes. Most of the time I'm just working with other authors, or here on GoIndieNow doing the Indie Connection or the monthly marketing tip. And I own Fiction Atlas Press, who does a lot of charity anthologies like Wicked Wishes.
So we're here to talk about the foil. Ooh, yeah. It's a very apt character arc to use in crime fiction, especially because it can lead to red herrings. It can do all kinds of different things for you. It can help with a twist, all those things. There's 2 schools of thought with the foil, right? There's the idea that it can be your antagonist versus your protagonist, or be a separate character that bothers the main character. So I'm kind of curious to start with all of you. How do you view the foil? Where have you used it, and where has it been effective for you?
I think the foil is all about the story you're trying to tell, because if you only have 2 characters, in something like, and that's how you lose the time war. If you really only have 2 characters, the foil is the relationship between the 2. It's not necessarily a protagonist and antagonist in that story. it's very much each is a foil against the other. You're watching them as they spiral down closer and closer to each other. Other stories, the foil is the antagonist because you're bouncing off against each other. I mean, look at every Batman comic book, or pretty much every comic book we have. You're balancing the strengths and weaknesses of the one against the other. I actually really like, though, playing with the foil when the foil is in some way, shape, or form allied with the main character, because you get that sense of a little bit of conflict, and you can create some realistic conflict between your main character within their arc of the story and make people wonder what's happening and going on there. But you get to actually stress that person from inside of where they're at. And so it's a fun thing to play with, but really the whole thing with the foil is to show who your character is and how is he going to respond and how do they balance off against who they're playing with.
Yeah, it's a really classic kind of technique. I think Shakespeare was someone who used it quite a lot. Obviously, Mercutio and Romeo is probably the most famous example of it, and he would use it more as an example of kind of poking fun at Romeo, because obviously Romeo was very besotted and very romanticized idea of love and confused lust a little bit, where Mercutio, who was a more flamboyant character in a lot of ways, had a very kind of level-headed view of romance and what love was, and kind of cut through that quite a lot. Yeah, and as Jim said, you can use it in kind of different ways. I've used it in my latest book where I have a character. One of the main characters is in a kind of traveling party of 3, and I've used like a double foil kind of technique there, where you have the main character and you have the other 2 characters who are with her that are the foil to her in different ways, that they kind of represent. She's at a crossroads in her life where she's not sure what it is that she wants to do, and these 2 characters represent 2 different halves of her, or maybe thirds, I suppose, and they're trying to pull her in different kind of directions. And I'm using them to kind of show this. Well, this is what could happen if you do this. This is what could happen if you do this. And that's kind of a serious way of looking at it. And then, but it's such a flexible technique that you can do it in different ways. I mean, you've got Gollum, who's a great foil for Frodo, which again is very serious. But then you have Han Solo as a foil for Luke in a lot of ways. He's the more kind of, let's go off and have this life of crime kind of thing, and don't take everything so seriously. Although, there is seriousness to his character underneath as well.
I like both antagonists or maybe a side character being the foil. It really depends, like others have said, on the story. I really enjoy making the foil kind of a mirror of your main character, so you can explore ways that character, if a different thing could have happened to that character, how they could have turned out. So using that sort of mirroring is a nice way to explore deep down to what makes a character how they are, based on their past experiences and things like that. So it doesn't really matter to me if they're the antagonist or a side character. It's just very interesting way to contrast your main character.
I like the idea what you just said about the mirroring, the foil being the dark side of the main character. How does the main character stop the foil from overshadowing them? Why does the foil think that they should be the leader, be the main character in the story, and what is the foil doing to get that position, and how is the main character treating the foil? It's a lovely dynamic between the 2.
I have to say, I'm very disappointed in the Harry Potter fans here who have not mentioned the one guy that's been mentioned in every fucking show we've done so far, and that's Severus Snape. This is like the perfect time to mention this guy.
Snape is probably one of the biggest double agents ever written in fiction. He just played that so well. Mm-hmm. Is he a foil though?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, but because
he's the antagonist in the beginning, especially in that first book, right?
Because of that double agent, because of playing both sides, does that make him the foil?
I would say if he is a foil, he's more Voldemort's foil than anything, especially at the end. That's what kind of role that he grows into, I think. Which I think is what Jim was saying. It's good to give antagonists foils as well.
There's a story I'm working on right now that the foil in it is really more about the road not taken for one of my protagonists. That's part of the game that he's playing. Is as you get deeper and deeper, you know that they've got some long storied history together, but really part of what his role there is, other than to create chaos, is to really highlight one of my main protagonists, what his background, what his story is, and why he knows and has certain capabilities, and where he has to restrain himself versus the foil, who often elects not to restrain himself. And it's that the cost of the path not taken.
Is that kind of the tantalizing aspect of it? Is that you can move the story along with this character, as opposed to maybe, the antagonist and the protagonist have their own journeys and they're going to go that direction regardless. And oftentimes the other character arcs we've talked about, the love interest and the sidekick, they all go along that road. But the foil can zigzag. The foil can move around. Is that kind of the appeal of the foil for you all, or is there something else about the foil that appeals to you?
Having the foil in the story, it allows you to then have the conflict. And of course, you can't have a great story and a page turner unless you have that conflict. They bring the conflict, especially my foils do. So yeah, that's what I use them for.
One of the things I like about the foil is that, as you were saying, Joey, they can zigzag in and out of the story, and they can pop up in different places, and you don't have to follow them all of the time. And they could be off doing their own story. Like, one of probably a really famous modern foil, and it's not a great one to kind of bring up, but it came to my mind, is Draco Malfoy in Harry Potter. They're the perfect protagonist and foil relationship, and Draco will disappear for chapters at a time and then just reappear with something. There could be a story about what he is doing, and in fact, in one of the books, he has a main story arc that affects what is going on in the main book. But what's great about the foil is that, with the antagonist and protagonist and even sidekicks, you kind of have to spend a lot of time introducing them and kind of building their character up and their likes and dislikes and characteristics. Where with the foil, you can just drop them in sometimes and they're fully formed. And what I like to do with them is to kind of introduce them in a scene that kind of shows their character. So if my foil is like someone who likes to drink and gamble or something like that, I can just do a tavern scene or something like that, or a bar scene, and have them in there, and just show them in this environment, and I don't have to do an explanation as to why they are this way. It's just, this is who they are. And you can kind of have quite a lot of fun with them as well, because it's almost like, and this is a poor analogy for me, where it's almost kind of like letting your hair down a little bit with a character. Straighten my beard out, I think is because you can just say, well, this is this character, this is what they do, this is how they are, and let's have some fun with them. And later on down the line, if you keep using them, you can flesh them out a little bit more, you can give them a bit of a background if you want to, but there's not that same expectation for them for that, because that's not their role in the story.
And I would also say one of my favorites, and because it kind of fills so many different roles, is the story of Jekyll and Hyde, because you're playing so many different things within the character dynamic of which one is the primary at the time, the idea of having that dark side come out of you. But I mean, if you look, Jekyll and Hyde are a foil to each other because they're two sides of the same being. And I think that's a really fun and interesting dynamic when you read the characterization that way, to look at them as almost being a foil of each other. Or if you take kind of the more modern interpretations, the Hulk, some of these sorts of things like that, where you see that inward battle as to who's in front, who's behind, even like Moon Knight, where the foil can be within the same body, but it's a different person or a persona, is a really fun one for me too, to watch how that story can progress and watch how the two play off of each other, because you can never while the conversation may happen, the two can never actually fully meet.
I like how unpredictable the foil can be. You don't have to have, I mean, of course, you want to have a plot line and everything, but he doesn't have to do everything, or he or she, whatever, doesn't have to do what is laid out for them. They can be unpredictable. They can do things that are shocking, and they can move the story along that way and keep it interesting without having to be a part of the main part of the storyline if they're not the antagonist. And they're just kind of fun to play with because of that, because they can do anything. They don't have to be as moral as your main protagonist and be as loved as your main protagonist and do everything right all the time. So having that little kind of like playground that you can do anything with them is pretty fun.
The foil kind of represents like it could be for both the antagonist and protagonist, so it can go both ways. Do you guys play with that a little bit? Is there a little bit of that funness to that idea that you can add one to the antagonist too and kind of flush out the antagonist that way?
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. I'm glad we cleared that.
Well, in the story I was talking about earlier, I actually have both the antagonist and the main protagonist both have a foil that they're bouncing off of. And you get to balance and see, because the antagonist, you're trying to figure out who the real antagonist is and who is the foil. That's part of their relationship, is which one is really the one that's the more nefarious of the two and which one is the enabler. And the relationship between them. And as they close together, the foil of my protagonist and the fight that they're going through, where he's being pulled more and more back to almost that dark side. From the other side, you're watching the dynamic of who's influencing who to make what decisions. And the play of the two foils is become way more complicated than I originally intended. But the play has created a really interesting scenario of rounding out both of them. So you see a well-rounded villain. You see one who is motivated and understand those motivations, because you can watch the story as he plays off with the foil. And the same thing is true with the protagonist, who is just trying to get along and make the next day get along. And then old people get dropped back into the middle of the life. And it's like, and he's got to do business with him. And that's where you're watching all of this come together, is how those players are all going to come and meet.
I tried to do the kind of angel and devil on the shoulder kind of approach. They're foils of each other, the angel and the devil, obviously, but then the person in the middle, they're the foils to them too. And like, when I didn't even notice it for a long time from my writing, but then when I went back and was kind of doing more development on it on my first book, I do the same thing with each one of my POV characters. They have like a devil foil and an angel foil, and it's just something that kind of just pops up quite a lot, and sometimes it's quite subtle and sometimes it's quite overt, and I didn't even sometimes it's so subtle that I didn't even realize that I was doing it, and then when I went through I was like, oh yeah, I just keep doing this same kind of thing. But I find it quite interesting because you can have protagonists being foils of each other as well. I've already obviously mentioned Harry Potter, but to mention another one that might get comments is The Last Jedi, which does this really, really well, where Rey and Luke Skywalker are foils of each other. They're both protagonists, but they want very, very different things, and they want the same thing, but they're just doing it in a very, very different way. And at points in their lives, like in Luke's life earlier on, he was very much like Rey, and now he's old and pessimistic and all this kind of stuff. And you know, he wants to be
beaten down by the system.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and now he wants to be left. And so when he was younger, he was like, I want to take the fight to the Empire. I want to take the fight to the Sith and all this kind of stuff. And that's what Rey is at now. And she's there and she's like, come on, let's go and do this together. And he's like, no, it's not my fight. The circle is always the same. Let's just stay here, right? And that's him being her foil. And to him, he wants to stay there. And she's like, come on, I'm just going to bang on your house every single day until you come outside and do this thing with me.
I would have said Rey's foil is, and you'll have to forgive me because I'm not a really big Star Wars fan, so I don't know the names of all these characters. The one who ends up giving his life to Rey at the end.
Kylo Ren.
I would have thought he was more of Rey's foil than.
Well, yeah, I think overall he is, but like what it is and what's good about the foil is that the foil can change as well, and it depends on where it is in the story. So like in that part of that story, Luke and Rey are very much foils for each other until they come to like that kind of agreement in a kind of way. And the agreement is actually for her to go away. Right? So it can change and it can develop, which I think is also interesting.
Yeah, that dynamic changed within the film from him being the evil doer and then him turning into someone that no one expected, and saving her life. And that was a nice dynamic change with that characters.
Spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen it.
Oh, come on, it's been years now. Everyone must have seen it by now. I think I must be the last person to actually watch the damn movies, only because I don't like them. My daughter forced me to watch them all while she's been here over Easter.
Rise of Skywalker was the last film I saw in a cinema before the end of the world, before it restarted.
Same here. Darth Emo had to watch the end of had to see the end of that because I've seen every Star Wars movie in a theater. I hate it. Going back to the first one, one of the other ones that I really enjoy is going back to like Princess Bride, where you see Wesley and Inigo Montoya, because they start out as adversaries, because Inigo Montoya is just like, I'm here and I'm on a mission. I'm on my mission from God. I've got to kill the man who killed my father. But in the way, I've been hired to take you out too. So it's that besting, but they're foils of each other via sword fight. They're foils of each other because of balancing that strength and showing who's the better of the two. But each of them still shares. It's still at the end of the day is his foil that comes back and helps to, in a way, save his life so that Wesley can come and round out the story. But when you watch the conflict between the two, when they have to go from being combatants to being friends and even on a shared mission, there's a fun part of the story there, which is very much a foil as well. So I think it's finding all the different ways that you can create conflict between characters in a way that frames it up, but still be able to create the relationship you need between the two of them, whether it's absolutely antagonistic or whether it is something that creates a much closer bond.
Part of the role of the foil is to bring out what isn't apparent in the main characters, whether it be the antagonist or the protagonist, and whether it's the antagonist bringing it out of the protagonist. So when you're in need of that, when you bring in a foil or you take heed to a foil and put it into your story, what is it that you're most searching for within your character that you couldn't define or put out there just by natural storytelling that needs a foil? What is the most important element to that character that needs to be brought out that you think the foil serves best?
I'm thinking about my fantasy now with Saya. She's battling a second will inside of her. And many times when this will comes out, she doesn't realize what's happened or what's been going on. And she has no memory of it. And through the two books, it's the duology, through the two books, she learns basically what this will is and who she really is. And this is a foil inside herself. And she has to either fight against it or allow it to take over. And she's in the situation where if she wants to win this war, she's going to have to allow this second will to take over and to do what it's there to do. I mean, I wrote it as that, but it never made me think, oh, well, that's a foil. It's not like, oh, I wrote it in a way, oh, that's a foil. It didn't click like that. It was just, it was something that was needed. It was something that told the story through the two books. And of course, gave all the end of the second book, all the nice bow tied up in a nice ribbon, and allowed all the readers to know exactly what was going on, because you only get clues during the first book.
So for one of the things I always look at that the foil really serves that purpose for is to be that thing that forces your character to dig deep and go to that place that they wouldn't go otherwise. It's that really purpose of going and saying, I really do have to do X. So, Krampus Claws, My Nice Little Krampus, new adult novel. Part of the foil there is between my protagonist and her brother's best friend, who is a bit of an ass. The relationship between there is what always forces her to go and stretch and take that risk. And as you go along, and even though he's a minor antagonist, really he's there to be that thing that says, okay, I need to make this next step. I need to take this next act, because it's either protecting family, it's doing the things she feels she needs to do. And it's the foil that makes her dig deep in many of the critical junctures along the way. And I think that really is one of the critical purposes of the foil.
In addition to that as well, one of the things that I use foils for quite a lot is, and that's why they can kind of change quite a lot or develop in the story, is that is to show and not tell. And so just to bring it down to like an actual just writing technique, instead of like telling people about a character's background or a character's internal struggle or something like that, you can externalize it by using a foil, by confronting the character with another character that is very, very like them, but different in certain ways, or would do things that would cross a line that they wouldn't, or would be morally a little different, or more reserved, or something like that, whatever way you want to do it. But it's a great way to just kind of do the showing and not telling in the story, and by putting in a little bit of drama, a little bit of conflict, a little bit of action, sometimes a little bit of drive into the story, instead of slowing it down and explaining things which you want to try and avoid as much as possible. I mean, to an extent, it's one of those rules where people are like, when you first start writing, they read these writing books and like, never tell, always show. But it's like, sometimes there is a place for telling as well. Yeah, it's a great way of showing is by creating this character that can bounce off your protagonist.
Well, and I think that brings up an interesting thing too, is the other purpose of the foil sometimes can be the character that can do the thing that your protagonist can't. If we look at a lot of crime dramas and crime shows and stuff like that, your hero is the guy that's always going to want to get stuff done, but he's also got the guy in his back pocket that can go do the thing he's not willing to do, whether it's getting his hands dirty. A while back, we did a show and a conversation talking about, sidekicks sometimes, like Hawk in the old Spencer for Hire series. You've got your dirty works guy who can be that foil to your main character by saying, it's okay, I gotcha. I'm going to go do the thing that you can't do or you don't want to do because that goes against your ethos, but you still want to get the job done. You just don't want to know how it happens. And I think that's another one of those things where that character can be the foil to show where the moral line is for your protagonist as well.
I gotta agree with Jim on that last point there. Specifically thinking about one of my foils and protagonists, I have one character who is discovering magical abilities, and there's one character who's been around for a long time. He knows how to use all of his abilities. He's pretty much recruiting people that are magical, and he's been around for so long that he's pretty much jaded, and he will do whatever it takes. And he kind of pushes my other character to where you get to that one moral limit that he will not cross. And so it tells you just how far that character is willing to go and where his limits are. And the other character, like I said, would do anything. He would burn down the world to get to what he's focused on or what he needs to do and what he cares about, while the other one is not really too busy, but too focused. He has such morals that he's not going to cross certain lines, even if it means someone he loves is going to die or going to be in trouble or something like that. It's like a way to measure your main character and how far they can go.
Yeah, it's funny. I love all these kind of writing rules. And I think
you're all meant to be
exactly. Yeah, I think most people have read Stephen King's on writing book, and like you read that and then you read one of Stephen King's book, it's like you didn't pay any attention to any of this thing.
It's so true.
But he was aware of the rule he was going to go break and ignore and feed to the spiders.